Why did he freeze at the sight of a waitress pouring coffee? Why did a single glance at her arm feel heavier than years of combat? Caleb had seen enough in to believe nothing could shake him anymore. But the moment he noticed the tattoo peeking from beneath the burned skin of the woman serving tables at Ray's diner, something inside him faltered. His fork never lifted again. His coffee cooled untouched. He sat there, trapped between disbelief and recognition, his heartbeat thundering as if the walls themselves had closed in. Because that mark wasn't random ink. It wasn't decoration. It was the insignia of a unit he had bled with, buried friends with, carried ghosts from. A unit that had lost their medic, the one woman who never faltered, who saved lives while shrapnel split the air. They had mourned her as fallen. He had whispered her nickname, KJ, into the silence of his nights. And now she was here, wearing a waitress uniform, burned scars crawling over her arms, a pot of coffee in hand. Caleb blinked once, twice. He wasn't dreaming. He wasn't hallucinating. He was staring at the ghost of a soldier who had once sprinted through flames to drag him and 3 others back from death. The medic who vanished into smoke and never returned. But she wasn't a ghost. She was alive, and she was being mocked in front of a room full of people who said nothing. At table 7, slick suit, loud voice, the kind of man who loved being the center of attention, slammed his fist against the formica surface and made the silverware jump. Look who's here. Freddie decided to pick up a shift today. His laugh was sharp, cutting, the kind of sound that demanded an audience. His entourage, 3 men in tailored jackets, laughed with him. One, Crane, always lagged half a beat behind, like an echo desperate for approval. "Hey, monster," sneered, waving his mug. "How about a refill? Try not to melt the cup with those crispy hands." The words landed like a grenade in the room. A few heads turned, but no one spoke. That was the ritual, every Tuesday, the same booth, the same taunts. The waitress stood still, pot in hand. She didn't flinch. Her face was calm, her voice level. "Good morning, black, no sugar," she poured steadily. Not a single drop trembled inside the glass pot. For an instant, Smile faltered. That was always the way. He thrived on fear, on weakness, but never gave him either. She moved on, Filling's cup, then the others. Silent grace, practiced restraint. Caleb sat in his corner, transfixed. He had seen burns before. He had carried men who didn't make it past the blast. Scars didn't shock him, but the tattoo half hidden beneath those scars, that was what held him captive. The curved line of a number, the faint outline of a symbol. He knew it like he knew his own dog tags. And when she turned slightly, when her sleeve slipped just enough, the memory struck him like a round to the chest. Night raid, chaos lit by flames, the explosion that swallowed their medic whole. They found nothing but smoke, blood, and silence. They buried an empty casket for her. He had carried that weight for years. But here she was, alive, serving coffee to men who called her a monster. "Tell me something," smirked louder now, hungry for the room's attention. "You fall into a meth lab, or was it a romantic bonfire gone wrong?" More laughter. Didn't waver. She capped the coffee pot with calm precision. "Neither," she said softly, "but thank you for your creative theories." Caleb leaned forward, breath caught in his throat. That voice, calm under fire, gentle even when delivering hard truths. It was the same one that had ordered him to hold pressure on his wound while she worked, blood pooling beneath them both. Didn't like resistance dressed in politeness. His jaw tensed, piped up with another jab. Didn't bite. She moved on, serving, smiling faintly, refusing to bend. And Caleb couldn't hold still any longer. He rose slowly, his boots echoing softly against the diner's worn floor. He walked toward her, toward the soldier he had buried only in memory. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady but thick. Turned, their eyes met. For a moment, the noise of the diner bled away. Caleb saw it then, not just the tattoo, not just the scars. He saw her stance, shoulders square, weight balanced evenly, hands relaxed but ready. It was the way soldiers stood when they weren't sure if home was safe ground. "Ma'am," he said carefully, his throat dry, "where did you serve?" Her eyes narrowed, the faintest flicker of caution. "Sir, can I help you with something?" He didn't hesitate. "First Infantry Division, Big Red 1. I had a medic named KJ there. She disappeared during a night raid, saved 5 men before the Humvee exploded." The room seemed to pause. Diner chatter faded. His voice filled the silence. "That was you." Her gaze locked onto his. Seconds stretched like miles. "Have you ever seen someone die?" she whispered finally, "and then pour you coffee years later?" His chest tightened. He sat down slowly, hands flat against the table, grounding himself in the reality that she was here, alive. Behind them hadn't stopped. He was too busy filming with his phone, grinning for his online audience. "This right here is the burnt waitress who serves us at and Crane Consulting's favorite diner. Check out the crispy skin, boys." Turned, her voice didn't shake. "You might want to save that for court." Laughed louder, but Caleb didn't. He wasn't watching a waitress anymore. He was watching a soldier preparing for a battle of a different kind. For the next 20 minutes didn't speak to him again. Not because she feared him, but because she was measuring, calculating. The way she had once assessed blast zones and triaged the wounded. She moved with calm precision, but her eyes flicked toward him when no one else noticed. Testing. Was he a threat, or was he something else? Caleb stayed still, silent, watching. He had come in for coffee. Now he sat as witness to a soldier fighting a war no one else seemed to see. Wasn't done. He barked again, waving his phone. "Come on, do that smile again for my followers." She turned slowly, her notepad firm in her hand. "Sir, I'm working." "Exactly," he grinned. "Work that charm, baby, or do I have to start tipping based on skin tone?" The comment landed heavy. Evan's laugh faltered. His voice was quiet but steady. "Mister, if you continue recording me without consent, I'll have to ask you to stop." "You'll have to what?" he barked. That was when Torres, the diner's manager, appeared from behind the counter. His voice was calm steel. "Texas law says otherwise. Harassment's a different story." For the first time, shifted uneasily. But before another word could cut the air, a man at a nearby booth began choking. His wife cried out. The diner froze. Dropped her notepad instantly. 2 strides and she was there, arms wrapping around the older man. "Sir, can you breathe?" He shook his head. Her voice sharpened, professional, automatic. "I'm performing the 1, 2. The third thrust sent a chunk of sausage flying onto the floor. The man gasped, air filling his lungs. Relief swept the room, applause rippled. His wife clutched his hand, tears spilling. Thank you so much." Nodded, calm as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Because she had, only once under fire with bullets snapping inches away. His phone had lowered, too, even they couldn't hide what they'd seen. Caleb's chest swelled with memory. The woman before him wasn't just a waitress. She was the medic who had once run into fire when everyone else ducked. And now she was standing tall in a diner, under ridicule, refusing to bow. She turned back to his booth, her expression unreadable, her voice crisp. "Do you still require anything else?" For the first time, his lips moved without sound. Looked down. No one laughed. Gave them the faintest smile. Didn't think so. She walked away, calm, collected, in control. And Caleb knew. The war wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. Why didn't she look at him again after saving that man's life? Why, after their eyes had locked, did she retreat behind silence? Caleb knew the answer. Soldiers didn't trust easily, not after fire, not after betrayal, not after being left for dead by a system that swore to honor them. Had measured him in seconds, and though recognition had flickered, she wasn't ready to let him back in. Not yet. He watched her move through the diner, graceful in her own way, wiping tables, pouring coffee, carrying herself with the same quiet control he'd seen in war zones. He recognized every beat. That steady rhythm wasn't the rhythm of a waitress. It was a medic's rhythm, fast enough to keep up with chaos, slow enough to calm panic. But he also saw something else, calculation. And his wingman still muttered at their booth, but something in the air had shifted. Their jokes weren't landing. The room wasn't feeding them laughter anymore. Customers were whispering, watching differently now, not with pity, not with mockery, but with a hesitant respect. Still couldn't stand silence. He thrived on it breaking under his weight. "Hey," he barked, waving his phone like a trophy. "Come do that smile again. My followers love a freak show." She turned steady as stone. "Sir, I'm working." "Exactly," he smirked. "Work it, baby, unless you'd rather I tip based on skin tone." The diner froze. The words hung heavy, toxic, even winced. His notepad was tight in her hand, but her voice stayed even. "If you record me without consent again, mister, I'll have to ask you to stop." "You'll have to what?" His voice rose sharp, a bully's bark. That was when Torres, the manager, stepped from behind the counter. His presence was quiet but undeniable. "Texas law says one-party consent, but harassment," he shook his head, "that's a different story." For the first time's grin slipped. He scoffed, waved it off, but Caleb saw the crack. Then silence broke in a way no one expected. The choking man at the corner had just sat down again, pale but breathing, his wife still clutching his hand. He looked at with something closer to awe than gratitude. She had just saved his life in front of them all, and for once, the truth was undeniable. But didn't bask in it. She didn't even pause. She checked his pulse, gave calm instructions, then moved on as though it was just another Tuesday shift. Caleb knew better. She had learned long ago not to take ownership of gratitude. Gratitude faded. Dignity remained. He rose and intercepted her near the counter. His voice was low. That was textbook, clinical, perfect form. Her eyes flicked toward him, guarded. "3 tour, you don't forget." He hesitated, then pushed the truth out before it could rot in silence. "KJ, you're still KJ." Her face didn't move, but her eyes did. They softened just enough to let him know she'd heard him. "Still am," she murmured, "though not many know it." "Why didn't you say anything, all this time?" She tilted her head. Would they have listened? Would anyone? He didn't answer because he knew the truth. No, they wouldn't have. "You died," he whispered. "I disappeared." "The fire took everything," she added. "Papers, proof, name, all that was left was this." She tapped the tattoo hidden beneath the scars. "And even it doesn't scan anymore." Caleb swallowed hard. "You ran into a hot zone to save 6 men. 3 lived. You were a hero before the scars. You still are." Her eyes flicked to his booth, where was chuckling again into his phone. "Heroes don't serve coffee to men like that." "Maybe not," Caleb said, "but soldiers do worse when the war comes home." For the first time, a ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. "Why are you here, Caleb?" she asked quietly. He told the truth. "I came for coffee. I stayed because of you, and because those bastards don't know who they're messing with." She studied him carefully, eyes narrowing as if weighing each syllable. "You still serve?" she asked finally. "Retired, contracted for a while. Now I run support programs for vets who got discarded by the system." "I'm not discarded," she said softly, "just misfiled." "Same damn thing." For the first time something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not sadness, recognition. "You think this is winnable?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "You've been fighting for 6 months," he said, "gathering intel, recording them, planning." Her lips parted slightly, surprise breaking through the mask. "How did you?" "I watched you. You look at them the way you used to look at terrain maps. You're running recon." Her laugh was dry, almost bitter. "And Crane Consulting. Tuesdays, same booth, same routine. They think I'm too broken to understand their talk, but I have every word recorded." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then you're already winning." "Not yet. One wrong move and I become the angry black woman who couldn't take a joke. They win. He leaned closer. So we don't let them twist it, we document, we expose, and when the moment's right, we move. Her eyes sharpened. You run advocacy, contacts. Enough, lawyers, journalists, unions. One journalist owes me her life. Her face stilled, then she nodded slowly. Good, because when this breaks, it can't be a spark, it has to be a detonation. Caleb almost smiled. Then let's load the warhead. They stood in silence a moment, two veterans not on a battlefield anymore, but planning a campaign all the same. When slipped back into the diner, she brushed Caleb's hand against the counter, not by accident, a signal. Meet me out back. Minutes later, they stood in the alley, shadows cast by cracked brick walls and a rusted dumpster. She tied her apron, rolled up her sleeves. Sunlight touched the scars. The tattoo glimmered faintly. You still remember the unit code? Caleb asked. She nodded, part of me, all of me just buried. They didn't speak for a moment. The silence carried its own weight. I thought you were dead, he said. I was supposed to be. He nodded slowly. I never forgot you. After they said I didn't make it. No body, no contact, but that was intentional. I didn't want to be found. Why? She looked away, eyes tightening. I woke up in a field hospital with no ID, no voice, burns too severe to talk. They listed me as Jane Doe. By the time I recovered, I was invisible. No records, no benefits, just a stranger in rehab. Caleb's jaw clenched. You could reached out. To who would believed me? I had no proof, just this. She touched the ink again. He stared at her. The memory of her sprinting through smoke lived behind his eyes. You don't need proof, you're proof. She shook her head. That's not how the world works. He sighed, leaning against the wall. Then let's make it work. For the first time since he'd entered the diner, she truly looked at him. Not with suspicion, not with calculation, with the faintest spark of trust. Inside, laughter carried faintly through the window. Straightened her shoulders. You ready to see how far this goes? Caleb nodded once. Always. She exhaled slowly, the way soldiers do before stepping into the unknown. And then she smiled, not for but for herself. Because the campaign had just begun. What does a salute mean when no uniform is left? What does loyalty look like when silence is the only weapon left to wield? Inside Ray's diner, the atmosphere had shifted like a current beneath calm waters. Still sat in his booth, but the weight of his confidence was cracking. His words didn't land the same way anymore. Even his allies chuckled less, their eyes darting nervously toward the counter where moved like nothing had changed. But everything had. Caleb watched from his booth near the window. He wasn't looking at, he was watching. Every step she took across the worn tile floor was deliberate, measured, but there was something new in her posture, taller, sharper. She had remembered something the room had forgotten: power. She poured coffee, cleared plates, wiped down tables. Nothing extraordinary, yet the room bent around her. Caleb had seen her stand like this before, back in Mosul, before disobeying orders to save a sergeant bleeding out on the sand. She had that same expression now. Not rage, not fear, calculation. Shifted in his booth, irritation simmering. Silence wasn't his element unless he owned it. He cleared his throat and muttered loud enough for the room to hear. They'll let anyone wear a uniform these days. Even kitchen burns can be medals. Forced a laugh, but it was brittle. At the corner table, Dory, an older woman, sharp-eyed, a diner regular, lowered her fork and stared at him without blinking. The silence deepened. Didn't answer. She simply finished wiping the table, nodded politely to the family seated nearby, and turned toward the kitchen. As she passed Caleb's booth, her hand brushed the counter, barely noticeable to anyone else. But Caleb caught it. Not an accident, a signal. Meet me out back. 10 minutes later, Caleb stepped into the narrow alley behind the diner. Cracked brick walls, a rusted dumpster, the faint smell of grease. Emerged, sleeves rolled higher, the scars on her arms catching the late morning light. She wasn't hiding anymore. "You still remember the unit code?" Caleb asked quietly. Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a confession. "Every digit, muscle memory doesn't burn away, it's still there, part of me, all of me." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of traffic muffled beyond the walls. "I thought you were dead," Caleb admitted. "I was supposed to be," she said. "Explosion burned everything. ID records voice, they called me Jane Doe. By the time I could speak again, I was already gone. Just another invisible vet with no papers, no benefits. Easier to stay erased than to fight the system alone." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You saved lives, they should fought for you." She shook her head. "No one fights for ghosts." "You're not a ghost," he said firmly. "You're standing right here, flesh and blood." She turned, eyes narrowing. "Then why are you here, Caleb, really?" He didn't flinch. "Because when I saw you today, I realized the war didn't take you. Silence did. And silence is something I can fight." For the first time, her eyes softened. "You still serve?" she asked. "Retired 2 years ago," he said. "Did some contracting. Now I run programs for vets who got lost in the cracks, the ones nobody files paperwork for." "I'm not lost," she said flatly, "just misfiled." "Same damn thing." Her lips twitched. "You think this is winnable?" "You've been running recon," he said. "I've been watching, you've mapped their routines. Tuesdays, same booth, same arrogance, you've been recording." A flash of surprise flickered in her eyes. "How do you know?" "Because you look at them the way I used to look at terrain maps, calculating, waiting, gathering." Her chuckle was dry. "And Crane think I'm too dumb to understand, but I've got months of audio, names, contracts. Their whole empire built on coded discrimination. They say it out loud over pancakes." Caleb nodded. "And now you've got me, witness, backup." She tilted her head, measuring him again. "Why help me?" His voice dropped, gravel thick with memory. "Because when I thought you were gone, I thought I'd lost one of the bravest people I'd ever known. Turns out you're still here, still fighting, and I don't leave soldiers behind." Her eyes locked onto his, long, heavy, testing if he meant it. Finally she nodded. "Then you should know, this isn't a battlefield, it's an ambush. One wrong move, I'm painted as the angry black woman who couldn't take a joke. They win." "So we don't give them the chance," Caleb said. "We document, we expose. And when it breaks, it doesn't spark, it detonates." The silence stretched, but this time it wasn't wary. It was alliance. Crossed her arms, scars glowing faintly in the sunlight. "You said you had contacts, journalists, advocates." "Enough," Caleb said. "And one journalist owes me her life." "Good," she said, "because this isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone they've broken. When this falls, it falls big." "Then let's load the warhead." Back inside, the diner buzzed with its usual rhythm. Plates clattering, kids laughing, the faint hum of the jukebox. But for Caleb, the air was different. He sat in his corner booth again, watching as she poured coffee for the very men who mocked her. Watching the faint, steady smile that no longer hid fear. It hid strategy. Leaned back in his booth, unaware of the ground shifting beneath him. He bragged about contracts, laughed about firings, whispered coded language about cultural mismatches and legacy employees. He thought was invisible. But her phone in her apron pocket was already recording. At the counter, Caleb met her gaze when she walked by. A subtle nod passed between them. Allies now. That night after the diner closed, sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open. She uploaded files, audio clips, video snippets, transcripts she'd been building for months. Each labeled, each organized. Harassment, retaliation, discrimination, illegal firings. Caleb sat across from her, writing the executive summary in his neat, blocky handwriting. They built the timeline together, connected dots, prepared the story. Fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she clicked send. 5 recipients: a civil rights attorney, a veterans union contact, a nonprofit watchdog, a federal portal, and Lena, the journalist who owed Caleb her life. She closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and leaned back. "Now we wait," she said. Caleb smiled faintly. "Not for long, she's already moving." Raised an eyebrow. "That journalist," he explained. "She doesn't do clickbait, she does truth, and when she publishes—" His lips curled into a thin smile. "Won't even see it coming." The next Tuesday would not belong to and Crane. Not anymore. Why did she wake earlier than usual that Tuesday morning? Why did her hands shake slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation? Had learned to prepare the same way she once did before a mission. Lay out the tools, check the gear twice, walk through the steps in silence until they became second nature. In Iraq, that meant med kits and IV bags. At Ray's diner, it meant a pressed apron, a steady smile, and a recorder tucked in her pocket. War wasn't about rage, it was about timing. She tied her apron as if strapping on armor. Caleb sat across from her kitchen table, sipping bitter coffee. He didn't say much. Soldiers knew when silence was sacred. He simply checked the files again, the backups on a drive, the redundancies in the cloud. No weak links. "You don't have to go in alone," he said finally. Her eyes lifted. "I do. They won't see me coming if I look like what they think I am." He leaned back, arms crossed, jaw tight. "They see you as a waitress." "Exactly," she said, "and that's the advantage." At 8:47 a.m. she walked into the diner like she had 100 times before. Ordinary, calm, invisible, but inside her chest, her heart pounded with the same rhythm it had in steady, hard, alive. Was already there, boots up, suit pressed, his usual entourage spread like a cord around him. Crane grinned too wide, laughter spilling a second too late, always desperate to match rhythm. The other men stared at their phones, pretending indifference, but everyone knew who ran the show. "There she is," announced as walked past. "The Tuesday monster, smile for us, darling." Barked a laugh. One junior exec half raised his hand for a high five before pulling back, realizing the room wasn't with them anymore. Didn't break stride. She greeted a family at the window, poured water at a booth, refilled a mug at the counter. Routine, calm, invisible. But Caleb noticed the tiny nod she gave the manager. He nodded back. Signals, everything ready. At 9:18, the bell above the door jingled. A woman entered. Early 30s, dark hair pinned neatly, blazer pressed. She carried only a small notebook and a phone, but her eyes carried more. They scanned the room, missed nothing, landed on Lena. She looked like a tourist at first glance, but Caleb knew better. He once pulled her out of rubble in Syria when shrapnel had collapsed half a building around her. She owed him ever since. Today, she wasn't here for debt. She was here for justice. She slid into a booth near the front, ordered black coffee, opened her notebook, poured without a word. Their eyes met, just a nod, no more needed. At 10:03, was halfway through a rant about loyalty in the workplace when his phone buzzed. He stood, muttered about a client call, and stepped outside. Drifted toward the counter. Caleb met her there. "He's about to get the first shock," Caleb murmured. "Lawyer or journalist?" she asked. "Journalist, went live 3 minutes ago." Her brow rose. Audio, video, transcripts, names, everything. The headline's simple: "Veteran Waitress Records Discrimination at Crane." For the first time in months, a flicker of satisfaction touched her lips. Through the glass they could see packing outside, phone pressed to his ear. His voice rose. "What do you mean under review? We've been your consultants for 2 years. Pause. What Instagram post? Pause. That's fake. Edited. A prank. Pause. She's just a waitress." Inside, phones began buzzing. One of the junior execs checked his screen, his face draining. Guys were tagged. In everything. Snatched his phone, his jaw slackened. She posted it, the whole thing, contracts, quotes, everything, it's everywhere. Not she. They didn't know it yet, but it wasn't just. It was, and Caleb and Lena, and every silent voice she carried. Walked to their booth, steady as stone. Can I get you anything else? Perhaps some humility. Nobody laughed. Appeared at her side. You need backup. She shook her head softly. They're already surrounded. The room was alive with whispers. Phones lit the air like fireflies. Even the kitchen staff leaned through the order window to watch. Stormed back inside, face red, voice sharp. You think this is funny? You want to ruin people's lives. Faced him calmly, scars bare, voice steady. No, mister, I want to stop people from ruining others. You're just some burnt-out veteran, he spat. Caleb rose from his booth, his voice cutting through the air like steel. She's a decorated combat medic, 3-tour, Bronze Star, more moral courage than you'll ever understand. The room stilled, phones lifted, every eye turned to. You're insane, he hissed. This is slander, lies. That was when Lena stood from her booth, sliding a card from her blazer pocket. Her voice was crisp, formal. Mister, it isn't slander, it's evidence. I'm Lena, independent journalist, and I suggest you retain counsel. The blood drained from his face. You'll sue, he stammered. You'll bury us. You'll try, said, but unlike your business model, truth scales fast. Caleb added, and the Department of Labor already has the files. The diner erupted, not in applause but in attention. Silence louder than cheers. Every phone camera caught as he stammered, cursed, then shoved his way toward the door. The bell jingled as it closed behind him. Stood still, her chest rising and falling slowly. Not triumphant, not smug, just steady. The war wasn't over, but the first shot had landed. Lena walked to the counter, hand outstretched. Sergeant, she said softly, thank you for your service and your silence. Today it just became the loudest sound online. Shook her hand, firm. She didn't smile, she didn't need to. The room didn't cheer, it respected. And Caleb, standing beside her, knew this was only the beginning. Because predators didn't run when exposed, they lashed out. And wasn't finished. Why do men in power panic not when they're guilty, but when they're seen? That question haunted Caleb as he sat in his truck outside the diner 2 nights later, watching shadows shift across the parking lot. The fallout from Tuesday's exposure had already spread online. Lena's article had been shared across veteran forums, worker rights pages, and even local news stations. The comments piled higher than he could track. Some praised as others dismissed her as a bitter waitress making things up. Caleb knew the truth. The war had just changed battlefields. Hadn't said much since that morning. She went to work her shifts, came home, uploaded more files, and answered Lena's questions with calm precision. But Caleb saw it in her silence, the storm building underneath. She wasn't afraid of. She was afraid of what came after him. Because retaliation was never loud at first. It was quiet, precise, calculated. And it came quickly. The first sign appeared Thursday morning. His landlord left a notice on her door, pending lease termination. No explanation, just a date circled in red ink. She didn't flinch when she read it, just folded the paper neatly and set it aside. They're coming at me sideways, she muttered. Caleb's jaw tightened. He's got real estate contacts, he'll squeeze where he can. That afternoon pulled her aside at the diner. Someone called corporate, complained about your behavior with customers. They used the word aggressive. His voice was sharp with anger, but his eyes carried worry. I told them it was garbage, but corporate rattled. She nodded once, expected. Leaned closer. You want me to fight harder? She shook her head. Not yet, that's what they want, to make noise, to make me look unstable. Caleb, seated at the counter, listened. His chest burned. This wasn't battle rage. It was the fury of watching a comrade punished not for failing, but for daring to survive. That night he sat at her kitchen table again, files spread across the wood, empty mugs lined the edge. They'll dig at everything, Caleb said. Credit score, medical history, old employers. They'll drag out whatever they find. Let them, said. I've already lived through worse. Burns, silence, invisibility. This, she tapped a folder of screenshots. This is manageable. Her calm shook him. Not because it wasn't real, but because he remembered that same calm in combat zones, right before she threw herself into fire. You're not bulletproof, he said quietly. Her eyes lifted steady. No, just stubborn. The next day retaliated harder. His PR team issued a statement calling her an unbalanced individual with a history of fabricating trauma for sympathy. The words hit like shrapnel. News anchors read them in clipped tones. Some viewers believed, some didn't. But then something unexpected happened. Veterans started showing up. First was Cousin, a Marine in his 50s. He came into the diner, shook his hand, and said simply, "Thank you for saying out loud what most of us live in silence." Then a woman with salt and pepper hair walked in, Air Force, retired. She left a $20 bill on the counter with a note, "We've got your six." By Saturday, the diner was full of vets. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. Some wore old caps with faded insignia. Others came in plain clothes, but their posture gave them away. They didn't crowd her. They didn't make speeches. They just filled the booths, ordered coffee, and sat in quiet solidarity. Showed up too. He walked in with at his side both of them in crisp suits, cameras trailing. He wanted to reclaim the stage. He wanted to prove dominance. But the diner wasn't his stage anymore. When he opened his mouth to taunt, a man in a wheelchair at the counter spoke first. His voice was gravel, steady, carved from years of holding too much. "Son, sit down and eat your eggs, or walk out that door." Blinked. For the first time, his words caught in his throat. Didn't smirk. She didn't speak. She just poured coffee for the Marine in the wheelchair and moved on, scars catching the light like armor. Caleb watched, chest tight. This was what she didn't realize. She didn't need to fight alone anymore. The silence she'd carried was now shared, a choir of quiet strength surrounding her. Still, retaliation escalated. Late that night, Caleb spotted a black SUV idling near her apartment. Tinted windows, engine running too long. He stayed parked across the street until it rolled away. When he told her, she didn't flinch. They'll test boundaries, that's all. But he saw the shadows in her eyes when she locked her door twice. The war was no longer just words. Sunday evening, Lena called. Her voice carried urgency. "I've confirmed something. Isn't panicking just because of the article. He's panicking because your recordings expose more than harassment. They connect him to contracts, federal ones, discriminatory hearing practices tied to defense subcontractors. This isn't just workplace bullying, it's fraud, big fraud." Leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "How deep?" "Deep enough the Department of Justice will bite," Lena said. "But you need to be careful. When money's on the line, they play dirty." Caleb's knuckles tightened around the phone. "We've already seen shadows." "Then expect more," Lena warned. "I'll keep pushing the story, but protect her." After the call, Caleb turned to. "You understand what this means, right? They won't just mock you now. They'll try to erase you." Her eyes didn't waver. "They already tried once. I'm still here." He stared at her scars, the tattoo beneath, the steady fire in her gaze. She wasn't just surviving, she was leading. That night, as they sat in silence, Caleb thought of something he hadn't thought in years. Back in, after she saved his life, she had whispered 4 words as they lay in the dirt, both bleeding, both half-broken. "Don't waste the pain." Now he understood. The war was never about explosions. It was about what came after, the silence, the forgetting, the burying, and refused to be buried twice. Caleb leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "Then we dig in, we brace, and when they come harder, we don't break." Nodded once, agreed. And outside, somewhere in the dark, another SUV rolled slowly past her window. Why does fear walk quieter than courage? Why does it slip in at night, press against the window, and remind you that survival is never free? Woke at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of tires crunching gravel outside her apartment. She didn't move at first, just lay there, eyes open, heartbeat steady. War had trained her well. Don't panic, don't waste motion, don't reveal your position too soon. She slid from the bed silently, feet brushing cool floorboards, and peered through the blinds. A black SUV sat under the streetlight, engine idling. Same as before, no plates visible, windows tinted. They weren't here to knock, not yet. She exhaled slowly, shoulders squaring. She refused to let her pulse quicken. Fear wanted her frantic. Fear wanted her to feel hunted. She would not give it that. Her phone buzzed softly. A text from Caleb. I see it too. Don't move, I'm outside. She parted the blinds wider. Across the street his truck sat dark, engine off, but she caught the faint glow of a cigarette ember fatting in his hand. Watchful, steady. The SUV lingered 5 more minutes, then rolled away. Lowered the blinds. She sat on the edge of her bed, elbows on her knees, scars glowing faintly in the moonlight. She didn't tremble, but she did feel the weight pressing deeper now. This wasn't about harassment anymore. This was about erasure. By morning, the veterans' presence at the diner had doubled. Quiet men and women in plain clothes filled booths, their silence heavier than any speech. They didn't confront directly. They didn't need to. Their very presence cut him down to size. But adapted. He swaggered in anyway, trailing as always. This time, though, he didn't jeer. He didn't bark. He ordered eggs and bacon with a smile too tight, then leaned back and whispered into his phone for half an hour. Caleb, from his booth near the window, didn't like it. He's recalculating, he murmured when passed by. She didn't break stride. Good, it means he's bleeding. At noon, Lena arrived with updates. She slid into Caleb's booth, spreading printouts across the table, joined, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sfirm just lost 3 contracts in 24 hours, Lena said. Companies don't want the publicity, but it's not enough to sink him. He's pivoting, looking for new allies, reaching for legal shields. He'll fight dirty." "He already is," Caleb said. "SUV outside her place last night." Lena's jaw tightened. "Then we push harder. I've got a follow-up story in draft, not just harassment, fraud, discrimination in federal hearing. If I can confirm 2 more witnesses, it goes live." Leaned back, expression calm. "Then you'll have them by Friday." "How?" Lena asked. "Because thinks I'm still invisible," said. "And invisible people hear everything." That night clocked out of the diner later than usual. She walked home under the dim streetlights, scars catching the glow. Caleb insisted on trailing her at a distance, not wanting her to face shadows alone. Half a block from her apartment, the SUV returned. This time it didn't idle. It screeched to a halt, doors flinging open. 2 men stepped out, broad shoulders, dark coats, eyes hidden under caps. "Miss," one said, voice too casual. She stopped, weight balanced, stance wide. "Who's asking?" "Friends of Mr." Caleb was already moving, boots pounding pavement. "Step back," he barked, voice carrying the kind of authority that only comes from years in combat. The men hesitated, glancing between them. Then one smirked. "Careful, old man, streets don't play like sandboxes." Caleb's fists curled but lifted her hand slightly. Her voice was calm. "You've made your point. Tell it was received. Now leave." They stepped closer, testing. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. "I said leave." Something in her tone, steady, unshaken, commanding, made them pause. Soldiers know soldiers when they hear them. The taller man spat on the ground, muttered something about burnt freak, then climbed back into the SUV. It peeled away, tires screaming. Caleb reached her side, breath hard. "You can't just stand there like that. They could." "They didn't," she said firmly. Because fear makes you prey, calm makes you untouchable. He exhaled, shaking his head. You scare me more than any firefight ever did. Her lips twitched faintly. Good keeps you sharp. But when she locked her apartment door that night, Caleb saw it, the tiny tremor in her hand as she turned the key. She was human, and the pressure was mounting. The next morning, the diner was quieter. The veterans still came, but their silence felt heavier, more watchful. Even the regular customers seemed tense. Everyone knew something larger was unfolding. Entered late for once. His smile was gone. His hair was unkempt, his tie loose. He slid into the booth, phone clutched like a lifeline. Poured his coffee without a word. He didn't taunt. He didn't sneer. He just stared at her, eyes cold, calculating. Finally, he spoke. You think you've won. You think anyone cares about a burnt waitress. Her voice was level. They care about truth, and truth doesn't burn. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Truth gets buried, and so will you. Caleb started to rise, but a faint shake of the head stopped him. She looked straight in the eye. I've already been buried once. Didn't stick. The room went silent, leaned back slowly, lips curling into a humorless smile. He didn't speak again. When he and his entourage left, Caleb exhaled. He's rattled. Nodded faintly, which makes him dangerous. That evening, Lena called again. We've got them, she said. 2 more witnesses confirmed. Contracts forged, discrimination documented. The fraud story goes live tomorrow morning. Closed her eyes, leaning against the counter. Relief didn't come. Not yet. Then tomorrow, she whispered, the battlefield shifts again. Caleb looked at her scars, her steady hands, the tattoo beneath. He knew what she meant. Exposure wasn't victory. It was escalation. And when dawn came, wouldn't just be fighting for contracts. He'd be fighting for survival. What happens when silence finally breaks? What happens when the truth you've carried alone is suddenly in every headline? Didn't own a television, but that morning the diner had 3. All of them were tuned to local news. All of them carried her face. Not her name, not her scars, her face. Breaking this morning, the anchor read. A From Ray's Diner has exposed a web of discriminatory hearing practices tied to and Crane Consulting. Federal investigators are reviewing audio recordings, contracts, and first-hand testimony from multiple employees. The camera cut to Lena, standing outside the Department of Justice in D.C. Her voice was calm, sharp. This isn't just workplace bullying. It's systemic fraud tied to federal money, and it was uncovered by a combat medic once declared dead overseas. Has been silent too long. Today, her voice speaks for thousands. The diner was quiet, forks rested, coffee cooled. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. Wiped a table calmly, her back straight, her movements precise. She didn't look at the screens. She didn't need to. She felt the weight in the air shift with every second. Caleb sat at the counter, jaw clenched. He knew what came next. Truth didn't liberate right away. First, it ignited chaos. At 10:12 a.m., the diner door burst open. Stormed in, eyes bloodshot, face flushed. His tie was gone, his shirt half untucked. Trailed behind, pale, clutching a folder like a shield. You think this ends me? Barked, his voice cracking. You think one washed-up medic and some clickbait journalist can burn me down? The veterans filling the booths didn't move. They didn't shout. They just stared, the silence heavier than fists. Turned slowly, coffee pot in hand. Good morning, mister, your usual. Her calmness sliced sharper than any insult. Slammed his palm on the counter. You ruined me. Do you understand that? You've destroyed everything I built. Set the pot down carefully. No, you destroyed yourself. I just refused to stay silent. The room held still. Caleb rose from his stool, stepping between them. His voice was low, steady. Leave, before you say something that gets remembered forever. But wasn't listening. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and slapped it on the counter. You want truth? Here's truth. This woman is a fraud. No military records, no discharge papers, nothing. She's not even who she says she is. Gasps rippled through the room. Customers craned their necks, whispering, smirked nervously, feeding off the spectacle. Stared at the paper without touching it. Her voice was quiet but clear enough for all to hear. "You're right. My records don't exist. They burned in the fire that nearly killed me. I woke up with no voice, no name. They buried me on paper before I could speak again." Sneered, "Convenient story." She stepped closer, scars bare, eyes steady. "You think I want this? You think I asked for scars, for invisibility, for strangers to decide whether I exist? I didn't choose this, but I survived it, and I will not apologize for surviving." Her words cut deeper than any proof could. The diner was silent again, not with doubt but with awe. Faltered, for the first time his voice cracked softer. You're nothing, just a broken waitress." "No," said firmly. "I'm a soldier who came home, and I will not be erased again." The room erupted not in cheers but in something heavier, a murmur of solidarity. Chairs scraped as veterans stood one by one, a Marine in a wheelchair, an Air Force tech sergeant with a cane, a Navy corpsman with trembling hands. They stood not to shout but to witness. His eyes darted, sweat beading. For the first time he looked small, tugged his sleeve, whispering urgently, but lashed out one last time. "You think this army of cripples scares me. You think Washington cares about your sob story. You'll all fade, and when the cameras move on, I'll still be here." Caleb stepped forward, voice steel. "No, you'll be in court." Opened his mouth, but his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He answered, face draining as he listened. His words were clipped, desperate. "What do you mean indicted? No, listen, this is political, this is." The call ended, his hand shook. Smirk was gone. He looked at like a drowning man watching his lifeboat sink. Dropped the phone on the counter. His voice was hollow now. This isn't happening." His reply was soft, almost kind. "It already did." He staggered toward the door, scrambling after him. The bell jingled as it shut behind them. Silence filled the diner again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was cleansing, like smoke clearing after fire. Exhaled slowly, setting the coffee pot down. Her hands trembled for the first time, just slightly. Caleb caught it, stepping closer. "You did it," he murmured. Her eyes lifted to his. "No, we did." For the rest of the day, the diner felt different. Customers didn't whisper anymore. They greeted her by name. They thanked her. Some even cried softly into their napkins. But didn't bask in it. She kept moving, pouring coffee, clearing plates, steady as always. That night she walked home with Caleb beside her. The SUV never appeared. The street was quiet, almost too quiet. Inside her apartment, she sat at the table, staring at the files she no longer needed to hide. Caleb sat across from her, watching. "What now?" he asked. She leaned back, eyes heavy, voice soft. "Now we wait. Justice is slow. Retaliation isn't. The war isn't over." Caleb nodded, reaching for his cigarette pack, then setting it aside. "No, but you've already won the hardest battle." Her eyes flicked to him, tired but alive. "Which one?" "Believing you existed," he said softly, "when the world told you you didn't." For a long time she didn't speak. Then she whispered, "Sometimes silence is the only weapon you have left, but even silence has its breaking point." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "Then let them hear you now." The clock ticked softly. The night stretched long, and for the first time since the explosion that stole her name, allowed herself to hope. But outside, beyond the glass, shadows still moved. Because predators don't surrender when exposed, they evolve. And wasn't finished yet. What does victory look like when it isn't parades or medals? What does justice feel like when it arrives slowly, quietly, without fanfare? For it began with silence. The morning after's public collapse, Ray's diner opened as always. Plates clattered, kids laughed, coffee steamed in pots. But the room had changed. Conversations paused when she walked by, not out of pity, not out of fear, but out of respect. Customers leaned closer to thank her softly. Veterans saluted with nods instead of words. Even the manager carried himself taller, prouder, as if the diner itself had absorbed her resilience. Caleb sat at his usual booth, back to the wall, eyes sweeping the room with instinctive vigilance. He knew battles rarely ended when the shooting stopped. Enemies fought hardest when cornered. And was cornered. News cycles tore him apart. Federal indictments landed. Partners. His empire bled contracts by the hour. The man who once strutted into the diner each Tuesday now hid behind lawyers and locked doors. But predators didn't vanish. They lingered, searching for one last strike. That strike came on a Thursday evening. The diner had just closed. Chairs were flipped onto tables, was in the back counting receipts, wiped the counter, slow and steady, her scars catching the neon glow from the jukebox. Caleb leaned against the doorway, cigarette unlit between his fingers. The bell above the door jingled. Both froze. Stepped inside, alone. No entourage, no smirk, no phone in hand. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. But the thing that unsettled Caleb most wasn't his appearance. It was his calm. Predators at their most dangerous often looked calm. Didn't move. She set the rag aside and straightened. "You shouldn't be here," Caleb said, voice low. Ignored him, he looked only at. "You think you've won," he said softly. "But you haven't, you've destroyed me, and when I go down, I'll take you with me." His voice was even. "You destroyed yourself." Stepped closer. "You don't get it, men like me don't vanish. We rot slow, and when we rot, we spread, you'll see. The world forgets. The headlines fade, but the whispers eat you alive." Caleb moved to block him, but lifted a hand. Her scars caught the neon light as she spoke. "I've already lived through whispers. The army buried me. The government erased me. I came back anyway. You can't erase me twice." For a moment faltered. His lips parted, but no sound came. Stepped forward, closing the space between them. Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as glass. "You'll fade, not because of me, because men who build on cruelty always do, and when you're gone, no one will remember your name." The silence stretched, the air was heavy. Then's voice cut in from the back. "I called the cops when the bell rang, and I didn't see anyone leave." Blinked, caught off guard. His bravado cracked. He turned, stumbling toward the door just as red and blue lights flickered against the windows. He pushed out into the night, swallowed by sirens and shouting. The diner was still again. Stood rooted, chest rising and falling slowly. Caleb stepped closer. "You all right?" She nodded once. "Yes," then softer, "for the first time in years, yes." They left the diner together, walking into the quiet night. The air smelled of rain, fresh and clean. The next days blurred. Federal agents collected evidence. Lena's articles spread further, sparking conversations in boardrooms, in living rooms, in late-night news panels. His empire collapsed under the weight of truth. His name became shorthand for arrogance undone. And she kept showing up at the diner, not as a victim, not as a spectacle, as herself. She poured coffee, wiped tables, shared quiet jokes with accepted nods from strangers who had once looked away. But something had shifted in her silence. It was no longer heavy. It was chosen. Caleb noticed it most one Saturday morning, when a young girl sat at the counter staring at scars. The girl's mother flushed, reaching to scold her, but crouched gently beside the stool. "You see these?" asked softly, rolling her sleeve higher. "They look scary, don't they?" The girl nodded timidly. Smiled faintly. "They're proof I survived something big, proof that even broken skin can still be strong." The girl touched her arm gently, like a superhero. Chuckled softly. "Not a superhero, just a person who didn't quit." The mother's eyes filled. She mouthed, "Thank you." Caleb felt his chest tighten, because that was it. That was victory, not in courtrooms or headlines, in small moments, in dignity that taught quietly. Weeks later, Lena stopped by. She sat with them, sipping diner coffee. "You know what the story did?" she asked. "It gave people permission to speak. I've got dozens of emails, vets, single moms, office workers, people who lived in silence too long. They're writing because of you." Shook her head. "Not because of me, because of them. They just needed to know they weren't alone." Lena smiled. "Still, you lit the match." When she left, Caleb leaned across the table. "You realize what you've done?" His eyes held his. "I didn't do anything extraordinary, I just stopped hiding." He studied her scars, her steady gaze, the quiet strength that radiated more loudly than any speech. And he thought back to all the soldiers they had buried, all the names carried in silence. Sometimes dignity wasn't in medals or speeches or ceremonies. Sometimes dignity was in showing up, pouring coffee, refusing to break. That night, as locked the diner door, Caleb asked her the question he'd been carrying. "Do you ever regret surviving?" She paused, key in hand, scars catching the lamplight. Then she looked at him, voice soft but sure. "No, survival isn't regret, it's responsibility." He nodded slowly, the truth sinking deep. They stood there in the quiet street, two veterans who had carried silence too long. And for the first time, Caleb felt the weight lift, not because the war was over, but because someone had proven you could live through it. Walked away, her step steady, her back unbowed, her silence no longer heavy but chosen. And Caleb knew the moral of it all. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.